capitalism. This is like what all businesses do. This is how they succeed. But if anyone actually suggested this, they'd be just like looked at like, are you fucking kidding?
Yeah. By the way, I know at least one viewer is going to say, hang on, Marcel, sometimes companies do sell business things at a loss. Like a loss leader is in fact a term. And yes, sometimes companies do sell things at a loss to get their foot in the door to sell you something else at a profit, right? Like Nintendo, this is just an example I know very well because I'm a loser, right? Nintendo sold Nintendo Wii's at a loss, but the idea is that you're going to buy Wii games at a profit, right? But Nintendo wasn't selling Wii's at a loss in the hopes of driving Microsoft and Sony out of business over the course of the next 10 years. Or something like, I know we're really gonna get this gaijin now. We're gonna sell those Wii's for $500. The left can't think like the right.
There's no empathy. Although a lot of the right can't think like the left either.
Another thing noted fascist Donald Trump did was he tried to have a rally a week ago on June 19th.
Can you believe it? Can you believe
that Donald Trump tried to have a rally
on a Friday?
On a Friday, right? On Friday the 19th. Yeah. And this was a big deal because this was on Juneteenth, and I really heard someone say this would be like holding a Nazi rally on Holocaust Remembrance Day or something like that. Yeah. First of all, the idea that anybody is holding Nazi rallies anytime, any place in the United States is...
Well, the thing that's funny about it is, like, everyone would agree that if it was not a Trump rally, but it was like a Juneteenth celebration or some sort of like Black Lives Matter event, everyone would agree that having it in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where there was once a big race riot, and having it on Juneteenth would be like extra appropriate, right? Because you're like honoring those symbols. The only reason it's inappropriate, and they didn't say like it's inappropriate to have a political event on this, like in this context, because that's not, that should be reserved for non-political things. It is inappropriate to have a Trump event because a Trump event is racist.
Yes.
So the idea, like you said, it's like having a Nazi rally or something. So the idea is Trump having his rally in this place at this time is racist. Well, why? Well, because Trump rallies are racist. There's no way in. There's no way into that circle. I can't get into it.
Yeah.
It's just closed.
Well, it's really funny. And so if it wasn't clear, Juneteenth is, I'm not going to say, okay, Juneteenth is not a fake holiday. And Juneteenth was not literally made up this year. Juneteenth has indeed been a holiday for decades. It was made piece by piece, state by state, a recognized holiday. I think it started to take off in like the 90s or so, that you had some states recognizing it. You had a bunch recognize it in like 2008 to 2010, recognizing Juneteenth as a state holiday.
And now a bunch all recognized it this week.
Yeah, and then also recognize it this week. Right. And to give you an idea, now, Joe Biden, now it doesn't say much to say that Joe Biden forgot something, but Joe Biden actually was unusually sharp, and he was still wrong, because Joe Biden assumed that Juneteenth was the anniversary of the Tulsa race riot. He was like, yeah, it's pretty bad. And everybody's like, this idiot doesn't know what Juneteenth celebrates? Like, we've always celebrated Juneteenth, Winston. Yeah. To show you an idea of how insane this is,
Marcel, everybody knows that Juneteenth is about... 1 second. It's about... 1 second. Oh, there it is. There we go. Yeah, so Wikipedia. You want you to tell me what it's about? I know, but let's tell you tell the folks at home.
Juneteenth celebrates the liberation of the last of the slaves south of the Mason-Dixon line. Not the last of the slaves in the United States, but the last of the slaves south of Mason-Dixon. Also, Native Americans kept slaves a little bit longer after that, but minor.
That's true. You know that Don Cheadle, actually, his family, his ancestors were owned by the Chickasaw?
I actually did not know that. Interesting.
I saw that Henry Louis Gates has a show about that where he he does people's ancestry, like genealogy, to like teach them about their roots in slavery or whatever. And I saw a clip recently with Don Cheadle, and he was like, "Oh, your family was owned by Native Americans," and Don Cheadle just like, what? And he's like, "Oh yeah," he's like, "After the Emancipation Proclamation, Native Americans kept slaves," which Henry Louis Gates admitted that he didn't know about. even though he's a scholar about slavery and race in America. He didn't know that. And he's like, so I just learned that, and your family was one of those. They kept him until 30 years later.
Yeah. And to show you how much I cannot keep my mental guard down for even a second, I was at the post office 2 weeks ago. And while I was the first thing that happened when I walked in that post office actually was, one of the people behind the counter said, oh, you're not wearing a mask, right? I mean, it was immediate. There were two people on the counter, and one of them said, yeah, he's not wearing a mask. And then they made a joke. They said, I think that guy watches too much Fox News. Now, here's the thing. Fox News technically is the only, TV news that I watch. I just watch it, once, I'd say 3 hours a month is apparently too much Fox News. And I didn't want to say anything because technically they called me out, and it says something that the only possible way you're not wearing a mask is apparently if you watch Fox News. Everybody else is in lockstep. But okay, I let that slide. I'm not about to throw down over politics the politics of masks with some guy behind the counter of the post office. These two people were black, by the way. And this will be important in a second because, they started talking about, Trump's going to have his rally on Juneteenth. Disrespectful. And then I said, is Juneteenth some kind of LGBT thing? Because it's June.
That's hilarious.
Right? I simply thought that Juneteenth, some kind of, is a Stonewall or something like that. Even I didn't know, and I was in the most. I was not politically armed. I simply asked what Juneteenth was, and they again looked at me like I was the idiot, and they said, "You don't know what Juneteenth is? That's your history."
What did they say? What was their answer?
They said it was when the last slaves were liberated in Texas. And they're like, that's your ancestors, that's your history, you should know that. And the guy says, see, he watches too much Fox News. And again, I was so stunned. Again, maybe that's true. That's why I don't know what Juneteenth is. And I was so floored that I didn't argue it. I didn't ask any follow-up questions. I wasn't about to dig in my heels at the post office over whether or not this Black History holiday was a real thing, even though my instincts were screaming at me that it probably wasn't. And then finally, it wasn't until I had sent my letter and I walked out the door and I was just standing in the Alabama sun and I said to myself, okay, Marcel, let's take this back for a second. You're a pretty smart guy, Marcel. You've lived in America all your life. You've gone to pretty well-funded schools all your life. You've been Black this whole time. The functional odds that there has been a holiday about Black history this entire time, and you only just now found out about it at the post office, and you hadn't heard of it because you have been watching too much Fox News, a channel that you only started watching once Tucker Carlson got his show, is zero. You were not the weird one just there. You were gaslit into believing that you were wrong for not knowing about this holiday. I can't relax for even a second.
Is like perpetually being that, no, it's the children that are wrong, Skinner.
Am I out of touch? No, it's the postal workers that are wrong. Yes, that's actually basically what happened, actually. There's really not much else to say about Juneteenth. The agents of woke capital have all been going full throttle, saying they support Black lives and also gay rights. But, geez, this stuff is happening during Pride Month. Rainbow flag or black background. It's a tough decision. They're like sweating over which button to press. And
what percentage of our show is us like just verbally describing memes?
And they're saying, we're celebrating Juneteenth.
It's like at one point I'm just reading meme formats for the blind. Like there's a guy and he's sweating, right? And there's two buttons, and one of them says.
Now I think we can move on out of this riot-related news and talk about the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court recently held that based on the 1964 Civil Rights Act, being transgender is a protected identity, just like being Black is. The reasoning being that since the Civil Rights Act prevents sexual discrimination, since it's in theory okay to dress like a woman, say that you're a woman, go into the women's bathroom. If you're biologically female, saying that a biological male can't do those things is, by definition, discrimination by sex, right? Because if I were a biological female, I could go into all these women's spaces, and I can't because I'm a biological male. So that's sexual discrimination. To which anybody would say, yes, right? On a factual basis, this is obviously correct. And this was a 6-3 decision. And I'm trying to see which congressman delivered a really impassioned speech, a really good one. It was Senator Josh Hawley, Republican from Missouri, who delivered a speech called "Was It All for This? The Failure of the Conservative Legal Movement." And he describes how social conservatives, religious conservatives, were basically offered a deal by Republicans, which is, vote for us. We're not going to give you anything you want. Everything you want is a losing battle, right? We're not going to teach creationism in schools. We're not going to fight really at all to ban abortion. We are not going to try to fight against gay marriage. We're not going to fight for literally a single policy proposal that you want on the seat of the legislature, right? We're never going to do that. We will give you a certain kind of war that you guys like. Those you will get. Nothing else you want, but you will get those wars. And not only will you get those wars, but you will actually be blamed for those wars, primarily. But we will put conservatives on the court. And those conservatives on the court will sort of be the backstop against the legislature. So don't worry. And Josh Hawley says that deal is shredded. Right. When Neil Gorsuch, who was Scalia's replacement, I believe, right? When Neil Gorsuch is co-signing an amendment to the Civil Rights Act saying that if you as any organization do not allow transgender people to express their gender identity the way that they want to, you are just as much discriminating against them as you would be if you had a whites only sign, right? Because don't forget, churches can't be whites only. That is not allowed. So it's the same thing. So churches are obliged to validate transgender identities. And so Josh Hawley is saying, all right, so everything is off the table. There's no reason to vote Republican then.
No, there is, because you don't want to get robbed, remember?
Right, yeah, exactly. The only reason is law and order. And we're seeing how the Republicans, a Republican president, a Republican Senate, I think it's a Democratic House though, right? Right, total uselessness. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court refused to hear any cases on gun rights. Yeah, there's nothing else to really say on this one. It's like that episode title, stating the obvious without losing our jobs.
We definitely won't be getting any clerking gigs on SCOTUS. No, I mean, it goes without saying. I remember Pat Buchanan, obviously, who fought tooth and nail with the Bushes for decades, wrote, where the right went wrong about all the problems with the George Bush II administration. His stock answer when when the question was, are you voting for Bush or Kerry? He would say he's LBJ on this and blah, blah, but he's Reagan on judges. That was from Pat Buchanan. He would say flat out, the only reason to vote for the Republicans is because of judges, is because on the Supreme Court, they'll give them, people who will stand athwart history and yell stop. And instead, it's drag story time. I mean, I don't even know what there is to be said about that.
Yeah, there's nothing to be said about it. I really shouldn't need to disclaim it. And fundamentally, if anybody's listening to this podcast, 10 years, 20 years in the future, it doesn't matter to me. It's too late. If you're hearing this, it's too late. I'm not for teaching creationism in schools. I'm not for banning gay marriage. I'm definitely not for the kinds of wars that evangelicals want, or any war for that matter. Right? I'm merely observing the deal. Finally, on Republican news, is John Bolton wrote a book, and which means he is the new hero of the Never Trump movement, right? John Bolton, hero of the resistance.
I think that's going to be on the sign in front of the fire station in front of my house.
I think that's the title of the episode, actually. John Bolton is a hero of resistance, and he's saying Donald Trump, everything that the Never Trumpers want to hear. Oh, he accused Donald Trump of telling China to put the Uyghurs in concentration camps. He accused Donald Trump of soliciting China's help to win the election